Welcome, everybody. I think you'll find this panel quite interesting. I've talked to a number of you, and I know that everybody's concerned about their water. There are a number of issues that we're going to try to tackle here and discuss the kind of issues that you'll face as you go forward in looking at water quality. And we have with us today two distinguished gentlemen. Keith Scroggins on the far right is the COO of the Baltimore School District. He has a 64 school organization. I'm sorry, 160. Wow, just slightly off. I apologize. and quite a large budget. He also handles transportation, so he's a man with many hats. And on my immediate right here, we have Keith Barton. Keith was responsible for all facilities about a year or so ago and ran that organization quite effectively. He's now in charge of affirmative action for the Newark, New Jersey School District. And that one has about 85 schools. 65? 65, okay. Wow, a little bad information in the booklet there. Sorry about that. So I'm going to begin by just giving you a little background here. As I said, a lot of people are concerned about their water. Lead has become an issue. Everybody knows about Flint. Keith has actually been in this situation for over 10 or 11 years because of Washington, D.C. had a similar problem to Flint, Michigan, where lead was being extracted by a change in water chemistry. And they found it because children's test scores were dropping. And interestingly enough, they traced it back to the water. So this is a pretty serious problem. Keith dealt with that issue, and I'd like him to kind of start off and give us a little background on what you did, how you found it, and what were the initial reactions to the situation.
I wasn't sure which Keith you were talking about. Okay. Good morning, everyone. It's always great to talk to people standing room only. We have one person standing. Yes, for 11 years. I've been involved with this. Initially, when I first came to the district, I worked for the city, and most people don't know this. The school system is actually controlled by the state. But I was head of general services, and I came over to the school system. And one of the biggest problems that the school system had was its drinking water. And so every day we were going through flushing protocols to flush out the water fountains and hopefully test them and get a good enough reading that we would allow that water fountain to continue to provide drinking water to the students. But what we found over time was that one day fountain A would pass in terms of the amount of lead in the water, and then a month later it would fail. So I felt that we were creating this industry where we were doing more and more flushing, yet we were getting mixed results. So in talking with the CEO at the time, in 2007 we decided to go to bottled water entirely throughout the district. Without question, that eliminated a lot of the complaints, the concerns, and we went from one industry to the next. But after 10 years, the decision, one of the things that I've been looking for is innovation or technology that would allow us to provide water fountains in our schools where kids could drink from, because we had thousands of students over that 10-year period that had never had a drink from a water fountain in their schools. And so what we found were that when people would talk about the school system, the first thing they would always say is, and kids can't even drink from the water fountains in those schools. So what we have not done is eliminated the problem with lead in the pipes, but with EcoWater, we've been able to put state-of-the-art filter systems that, from the pilot that we've conducted, have truly worked, and provided us with safe drinking water for our students. And we've also added to that by buying all new water fountains. And we believe that that will be a game changer for us by using technology and adding drinking water in the schools. And it eliminated all the problems with the bottled water. In 10 years, many of our custodians gotten a lot older. They don't like carrying those heavy bottles. They're supposed to clean the receptacle before they put the new water bottle on. Well, a lot of the custodians weren't doing that, which gave us some concern. The cups, you'd find the cups all over the school, outside the school. You know, kids just looked at it like, well, these are dispensable. I'll drink this time, throw it away, go down here, drink, use another cup. So the cost for bottled water went from $330,000 a year to $525,000 a year. So there has to be a better way. I think we found that better way. And right now we're moving full steam ahead with EcoWater and the filter system.
Keith, Barton,
Yeah.
what's your experience and a little
So,
history?
Our experience was a little more, I would say, accelerated in that we voluntarily conducted testing, sampling of our water outlets throughout the schools. And what we found about 2 years ago, I received preliminary results which showed that there were elevated levels of lead, which is beyond 15 parts per billion, which is the standard, in 30 of our buildings, so in just about half of our schools. And as a state-operated district, that meant involving not only our superintendent, but of course, state agencies. And so once the reporting and the escalation happened, which was really in one day, the decision was made from Trenton to actually turn off all of the water in those 30 schools immediately and to distribute boxed water, because that's all that the state could provide in such a short period of time. So I thought this was going to be a regular day. Would go home, 6, 7 o'clock, come back and start again the next morning. Well, that didn't happen. This turned into literally working for 36 hours straight to ensure that 95,000 one-gallon cartons of water were delivered on pallets, and they had to hire a trucking company. And of course, we don't have loading docks at many of our schools, so I had to, along the way, recruit our custodial staff to come back in, because this was after 11 o'clock, to break down the pallets when they were, as they were being delivered. And so I spent the better part of that 36 hours in Newark's Emergency Management Center. So this was my first time even seeing something, like this. Was just a wall of screens and all these computers and all this technology. So it was quite an interesting experience. But at any rate, once that happened, then we began to collaborate with the DEP, the Department of Education for the state, and they ordered and basically directed us to test every outlet, and so including non-drinking. And so you're talking about numbers of in the neighborhood of 9,000 to 10,000, and so we had to undertake this huge effort to catalog every outlet, to come up with a unique identifier for every outlet, and then develop a sampling plan. If anyone's familiar with the 3T document, there's a need to develop a sampling plan and a quality assurance plan so that the sampling is done consistently across labs, because of course one lab can't do all those samples. And so we wound up meeting with and contracting 8 labs to do this work. And so the cost to do the sampling was approached $1 million just to do the sampling, because we did a first draw and a flush sample from every outlet. And so as we began to look at the data, we determined that, and a lot of this was, we kind of knew, but our data kind of confirmed that the bulk of the problem was underground. The bulk of the problem was in the service lines, because, of course, we have an antiquated, plumbing system in the city. Of course, there's a lot of lead soldering and all of that to do that contributes to the, lead content in the water. And along the way, because of how this kind of unfolded, the trust factor became very important for us. And so, we decided that, flushing, we tried, and we did not find that to be sustainable. And we had to determine which filtering product that we were going to use that would help us to not only provide safe drinking water, but to help the community begin again to trust the fact that the water that we're providing in our schools is actually safe for students, staff, and our visitors to drink. And so, that's why we decided on the, Eco Water product. And I'm happy to say that those 30 schools, as of September of this school year, are actually all back on city water. So it was a huge effort, but they are all back on city water now. And, we're just continuing now to go, to kind of finish going through the district and adding filters to every drinking outlet throughout the district.
Thank you. So, Keith Scroggins, you brought up a really key point, because I think this is kind of missed when people are talking about lead and testing for lead and what to do when they find it. The issue really is, I found one or two quote-unquote hot fountains, and let's replace those hot fountains. But the reality is quite different, right? Because as Keith Scroggins said, Keith S., I'll maybe call you, that most of the lead contamination is actually coming from solder joints behind the walls that connect the pipes, and from lead supply lines coming into the building, right? And as a result of that, just dealing with the fountains is not the solution. In fact, what's occurring is typically that solids are breaking away and they get hung up in the nooks and crannies of the fountains, right? So lots of little, areas that lead can hang up, colloidal lead and solid lead, and they keep on giving off, obviously, contaminants. And when you replace the fountain, everybody goes back and tests right away and says, well, we dealt with the problem. This fountain is now giving clean water. But the reality is that this is kind of a whack-a-mole problem. Today it's over here, and tomorrow it's actually someplace else. And so that's really kind of a very important point to think about as you approach this, that only 18% of lead contamination actually comes from the fountain itself. And most of the lead contamination is pre-fountain. And so, if the filtration approach we found to be obviously a very good one in terms of treating the water just before it's consumed, right? And so you know that it's clean, you know that no particulate lead is getting into the fountainhead, and in fact you can keep the fountains that you have, just clean them out, and just use the filtration solution. Both of you went through kind of early stages of developing the plan before your states actually had a plan. Can you talk about the best practices that you found in terms of testing and the approach that you used, and now what's required by the government agencies?
Well, actually, at one time, the flushing was the best thing that you could do. Utilizing a number of companies that had grown up doing this type of thing. However, I would just say over time, it proved itself not to be as reliable, particularly when you're considering that young children are drinking the water. I had not found a system until I met with EcoWater actually a year ago at this conference. So I have been pushing very hard this year to get it done within a year, because I don't want it to be 3 or 4 years. You never know what's going to happen in the future. I want to get it done now. I want Baltimore City students drinking from clean water fountains in our system. I think this is the way to go, and I'm saying this honestly. I am not a paid representative of EcoWater. I'm not getting any benefits from them, but I truly believe in the product, and that's why I'm here talking about it. I think we met with every company that was interested to show us their filter systems, including the company that provided us with the bottled water. And they could not give us the kind of guarantees that we received with this product. And we were able to try out this product. We started in late June. We have a pilot in 2 of our schools and our headquarters building. And we just feel that this is the excellent product that we need. And also, we have already done our RFP. EcoWater was selected, so I'm not doing anything ahead of time. So we followed the system, the protocols, and I do believe that this is the best system that we can utilize at this time.
So, you know, in our situation, there are, of course, a lot of similarities to what KS is going through. I'm KB. And, you know, what I would say is, you know, given you know, what we just talked about in terms of where the majority of the lead content is, filtration, short of, you know, considering a huge undertaking of actually changing these supply lines and you know, getting into the city's plumbing infrastructure, which I don't know will ever happen. You definitely need a filtration system that you can rely on, that, you know, first of all, we have to trust it, meaning the facility staff, but also it's got to be something that we can stand behind so that we can kind of communicate our confidence that, you know, students and staff are you know, drinking safe water, because again, that helps to restore the trust in your school, you know, in the school community. And so, you know, we also tried flushing. We established flushing protocols. We, you know, trained all of our custodians and all of that. But what we found is that we had to consider the human factor. And this product helps us to kind of solve for that. Because as humans, I don't think this is a news flash. None of us are perfect. And, but when it comes to safe drinking water, we've got to be able to give the public a 100% assurance that the water that's being supplied is indeed safe, and that it's going to be safe every time it's called for. You know, whether it's a student accessing a water fountain, or your kitchen staff accessing water for cooking and food preparation purposes, we've got to know every time that tap is turned on that we have virtually lead-free water coming out. And just another thought that kind of helped to guide our thinking around, you know, this approach was just to kind of realize and continue to remind ourselves that the goal is actually 0 parts per billion. That's the goal, is that you're supplying water with absolutely no lead in it, because 1 part per billion of lead is not good. And that's, you know, something that we have to kind of realize. 15 parts per billion is the standard set, you know, by the EPA, you know, so that's what we go by in terms of escalation. But in terms of when you look at it through the lens of health, public health, 0 parts per billion is what you're going for. And so we needed a product that, you know, gave us a very high degree of assurance that we were getting as close to 0 parts per billion as possible every time anyone in any of our 65 schools calls for water.
Thank you. I also want to mention, I don't want to make this a commercial, but you know, I just wanted to mention that we not only deal with lead, but we take out bacteria, virus, cyst, VOCs, and lots of other things in the systems that we provide, both for fountains and for kitchens. So kitchens are another important area to consider. The kitchens, when you cook with them, the steamers and pot fillers, et cetera, ought to be filtered. The lines in the kitchens are typically, in older schools, obviously put together with lead. And so that's another consideration as people look at the problem, that often the lead is being cooked into, or other contaminants, I should say, also cooked into the food. And so when you pour out spaghetti water that the spaghetti was cooked in, there's no lead in that water. It's all been moved to the food. So that's another important consideration. I wanted to just address quickly this 3 T's that everybody is kind of getting their heads around. Some of your states have not kind of progressed very far with regulations yet. I think New Jersey and the Washington, Baltimore area has really been ahead of the curve here. So maybe you can just address the 3 T's and kind of just in a couple minutes, because I want to really open this to questions.
Sure. So when we began to engage with the DEP, they used as a reference the 3T document that essentially has been kind of shelved for many years. And so, as in collaboration with the DEP, we kind of went back to that and followed those protocols for test, train, and tell. And so, as a result, that helped to kind of structure the manner in which we conducted our sampling events, as we were again charged to sample every outlet, drinking and non-drinking, throughout the district. And then the training aspect was also important because our facility staff had to work alongside, first and foremost, the certified labs. And so there were many meetings with the facilities team and the certified lab representatives to talk about testing protocols and just exactly how those samples would be collected across the district, so that, again, so that we could stand behind the data that we would have to eventually tell the public about. And so the third T, tell, of course, dealt with us making this information public. Of course, all of the results were put in a user-friendly format and posted on our website. We sent numerous backpack letters home to parents. We had a number of presentations at board meetings, as well as just community meetings. I felt like I was on a road, like a road show, more or less. But we went across the district and met with parents, met with students, answered questions. And I'll be honest, I think one thing that was really helpful was that the school community had a strong desire to get back to the city water. So that really helped, because that's what they kept saying. Okay, when are the kids going to go back to city water? When are you turning on the fountains? And so that kind of helped to motivate us and keep us focused and driven toward that end, because we could tell by that response that continuing on bottled water was not a sustainable option, because that's not what the community wanted. And so we also, I've mentioned the word trust throughout my remarks, and again, I think that is the focal point for me, and that's what helped me to kind of lead the team to this end of getting all the schools back on the city water, certainly by this September. And it was important because, again, we have to be able to demonstrate and communicate to the community that we stand behind our staff, we stand behind our process, we stand behind our data, and giving them full assurance that the water is safe. And so I just want to talk briefly about an acronym for trust that we've considered. And so the first T in trust is the testing of drinking water outlets. Of course, you want to make sure you have an understanding of how widespread the problem is across your districts, so that you know where you have to focus. The R is that, of course, any results above 15 parts per billion require immediate action. The U, understanding within your respective districts the unique challenges and the unique opportunities. And for us, filtration was a unique opportunity. And of course, as you're dealing with the media blitz and concerned parents and concerned students. The S is staying the course. And the last T, of course, is after you get through all of that, is that you work toward a common goal of restoring the trust in your drinking water system.
Great. Thank you very much. So I want to make sure that we allow some time for questions. We only have 5 minutes left, so yes.
You mentioned that you tested every faucet, every water location. When you treated, did you treat every location or just drinking water location?
Just drinking water. And so that's a great point. So what we decided, again, in collaboration with the DEP, was that for non-drinking, we would post signage, multilingual signage in bathrooms, slop sinks, that, you know, the water is not for consumption. And, you know, so that helped us to deal with the non-drinking outlets, but certainly filtering in kitchens and any drinking outlet.
Did you have anything to add to that, Keith?
No, I think the only thing is we didn't use words like consumption. We said, don't drink the water. We try to make it very simple.
Right.
But yeah, we follow
absolutely.
everything that KB said, yes.
So typically, you know, the recommendation from the plumbing associations are about 1 fountain per 100 students. A lot of districts are actually turning off the fountains inside classrooms. If they have bubblers inside classrooms, they're typically turning those off because it just gets overwhelming. And so, you know, 1 per 100 students, plus some convenience fountains, you know, extra fountains around the gym and the entryway, et cetera, are often used. Anybody else? Yes?
Are you still testing all of your outlets after your install?
The question is, are you still testing all of your outlets after?
So another great question. So as a result of, you know, this journey that we've completed now, the state now has passed a regulation which requires mandatory testing of all drinking outlets every 6 years. And so what we're actually doing now is just going back over, you know, the work that we've done. We're actually continuing to, we're still replacing old outlets and, you know, installing filters, you know, that sort of thing as that kind of comes on. But all in preparation for that next sampling event, which is now about 4.5 years away. So that's where we are now with the testing, and that would be for only drinking water outlets.
Actually, in Newark, we're actually doing 20% testing of his fountains on a rolling basis. So,
yeah, we're with the filtration, yes.
non-detect.
Yes, non-detect.
Keith, yes?
Yeah, I just want to say also we test the fountains prior to hooking up the filter system, then test after the filter system, and we're doing periodic testing once each month, just as we're doing actually with our newer schools, which have complete filtration system. These are point of use, but if they have a complete filtration system, we test them once a year before kids come back to school.
It's an interesting point here that I just wanted to quickly mention. We took apart some fountains in a school in Woodbury area in Minnesota, and we tested the water before we touched the fountain. It came up 15 parts per billion. That's why the school was concerned. We disconnected the water line and took a sample from the wall. That was 850 parts per billion because we actually touched the pipe. Okay, and so there's a reservoir of lead sitting inside the pipes, you know, there's a biofilm inside pipes, and that's where your reservoir comes. So when you replace a fountain, you know, that gets kind of sloughed off, but eventually comes back. Question in the back? Yeah.
Hi. Did you actually use your in-house staff to pull the samples and then a certified lab, or did you have the lab pull the samples? How long did that take, possibly, and what was the cost? And then the other thing is, how frequently do you have to change those filters?
Right. So I'll tackle that first.
Just
So-
let me repeat the question. So the question is, you know, how long did it take to do testing? Who did the testing, right?
Pulling the samples.
Pulling the sample.
Okay.
So in our case, the labs did all of the work. The labs actually pulled the samples and then, you know, tested the samples. And we had to come up with a unique identifier for every outlet. So to assist the labs, once we uniquely identified every outlet, then we prepared labels. And so that was the responsibility of the district staff that accompanied the lab reps on the at the sampling events, to make sure that the labels being affixed to the 250 milliliter bottle was an exact match to the label on the fixture. So it was, so that's how we did that. And again, the cost was close to $1 million.
And required by state law.
Yeah.
So they dictated what had to be done and how it had to be done. And Keith, ask
Yeah.
you.
I can't give you the dollar amount that it actually cost, but the labs actually did the sampling. We did not do that in-house because, of course, that would have been part of the newest conspiracy in Baltimore City schools. So.
But it's more serious than that, because lead comes in two forms. There is ionic lead, it's dissolved lead in the water that you can measure with test kits. But there is also colloidal lead, solids and semi-solids that are in the water. And this requires actually some rather sophisticated testing equipment. Typically, this is done on a mass spectrometer, ICP-MS, or other very sophisticated equipment, atomic absorption, that can only be done by a laboratory. So the test kits you buy at a Home Depot or something of that nature really are only measuring typically part of the lead contamination.
How frequently do you need to replace the filter?
So that really depends upon use.
How do you monitor that?
Well, what's good about this particular product is that once the filter reaches its filtering capacity, there's actually a shutoff switch built in that actually stops water from going, making it to the fountain or the faucet. And so that signals, that it's time for a filter change. And then, Eco Water will send, their teams out to conduct, to complete all of the filter changes. But it really depends upon the use. But if you have a fountain or kitchen in a high-use area, of course you're going to be changing those more frequently.
Well, actually, there's a second reason where the water fountain will be shut off. It's, of course, if the filter is full, but also I think these filters are set at a certain amount of gallons of water. When it reaches that point, then it will also shut off the water fountain. So it's not something you have to monitor except to make sure that water is coming out of the fountain.
Thank you guys so much, Keith Squared and Malcolm.
I told you we could
thank
go
you.
on for an hour. But if you have any questions, we're around. So I'd welcome you to just come up, and I'm sure the two Keiths would be happy to address them. Thank you very much. Appreciated your help.
All right. Thank you.